Chapter 31. The Shadow Realm was breaking down. In the west, the clouds had vanished and huge patches of the sky had already disappeared, leaving only the blinking stars and the overlarge moon in the black sky. One by one, the stars were winking out of existence, and the moon was beginning to fray at the edges. "We don't have much time," the Morrigan said, watching the sky. Dee, who was crouching on the ground, gathered as many ice fragments of Hecate as he could find, though he could hear a note of fear in the Morrigan's voice. "We have time," he said evenly. "We can't afford to be here when the Shadow Realm disappears," she continued, looking down at him, her face expressionless. But he knew, by the way that she hugged the cloak of the crow feathers about her shoulders, that she was nervous. What would happen? Dee wondered aloud. He'd never seen the crow goddess like this before, and he took pleasure in her discomfort. The Morrigan raised her head to look at the encroaching darkness, her black eyes reflecting the tiny spots of stars. "Why, we'd disappear also, sucked away into the nothingness," she added softly, watching the mountains in the distance turn to something like dust. The dust then spiraled up into the black sky and vanished. "A true death," the Morrigan murmured. Dee was crouched among the melting remains of the Yggdrasil, while all around him Hecate's elegant and beautiful world was turning to dust and blowing away on an invisible wind. The goddess had created her shadow realm out of nothingness, and now, without her presence to hold it together, it was returning to that once more. The mountains had vanished, blown away like grains of sand. Whole swaths of the forest were slowly fading and blinking out of existence, like lights being turned off, and the overlarge moon hanging low in the sky was losing shape and definition. Already it was nothing more than a featureless ball. In the east, the rising sun was a golden orb of light, and the sky was still blue. The crow goddess turned to her aunt. "How long before it all disappears?" she asked. Betsette growled and shrugged her shoulders. "Who knows? Even I have never witnessed the death of an entire shadow realm. Minutes, perhaps." "That's all I need." Dee laid the sword Excalibur on the ground. The smooth, polished stone blade reflected the blackness creeping in from the west. Dee found 3 of the largest chunks of ice that had once been Hecate and placed them on the blade. The Morrigan and Betsette leaned over his shoulder and stared at the sword, the reflections rippling and distorted. "What is so important that you must do it here?" Betsette asked. "This was Hecate's home," Dee replied. "And here, right here, at the place of her death, the connection to her will be strongest." "Connection," Betsette growled, and then nodded. She suddenly knew what Dee was about to attempt, the darkest, most dangerous of all dark arts. "Necromancy," Dee whispered. "I'm going to talk to the dead goddess. She spent so many millennia here that it is part of her. I'm wagering her consciousness remains active and attached to this place." He reached out and touched the handle of the sword. The black stone glowed yellow, and the carved snakes around the hilt came briefly alive, hissing furiously, tongues flickering, before they solidified once again. As the ice melted, the liquid ran over the black stone, covering it in a shiny oil sheen. "Now we all shall see what we shall see," he muttered. The water on the blade began to bubble and pop, sizzling and crackling, and a face appeared in each bubble, Hecate's face. It kept flickering, though, through her 3 guises. Only the eyes, butter-colored and hateful, remained the same as she glared at him. "Talk to me," Dee shouted. "I command you. Why did Flamel come here?" Hecate's voice was babbling, water snapping. "To escape you." "Tell me about the human children." The images that appeared on the sword blade were surprisingly detailed. They were all from Hecate's perspective. They showed Flamel arriving with the twins, showed the 2 children sitting, fearful and pale, in the battered and scratched car. Flamel believes they are the twins of legend mentioned in the Codex. The Morrigan and Betsette crowded closer, ignoring the rapid encroaching nothingness. In the west, there was no longer any stars in the heavens. The moon was gone, and huge portions of the sky had completely vanished, leaving just blackness in its wake. "Are they?" Dee demanded. The next image on the sword showed the twins' auras, flaring silver and gold. "Moon and sun," Dee murmured. He didn't know whether to be horrified or elated. His suspicions were confirmed. From the first moment he'd seen them together, he'd started to wonder if the twins were in fact twins. "Are these the twins foretold in legend?" he demanded again. Betsette brought her massive head down next to Dee's. Her foot-long whiskers tickled his face, but he didn't risk brushing them away, not with her teeth so close. She smelled of wet cat and frankincense. Dee felt a sneeze building at the back of his nose. The cat goddess reached out for the blade. but Dee caught her hand in his. It was like grasping a lion's paw, and her retracted claws suddenly appeared dangerously close to his fingers. Please don't touch the blade. This is a delicate spell. There is time for perhaps one or two more questions. He added, nodding toward the western horizon, to where the edge of the earth was crumbling, blowing away like multicolored dust. Betsette glared at the black blade, her slit-pupiled eyes flaring. My sister has, or should I say had, a very special gift. She could awaken powers in others, and ask her if she did that with the Himani twins. Dee nodded in sudden understanding. He had been wondering why Flamel had brought the twins to this place. He remembered now, in the ancient world, it was believed Hecate had power over magic and spells. Did you awaken the twins' magical abilities? He asked. The single bubble popped. No. Dee rocked back on his heel, surprised. He had been expecting her to say yes. Had Flamel failed, then? Betsette growled. She's lying. She cannot, Dee said. She answered what we asked. I saw the girl with my own eyes. The Egyptian goddess growled. I saw her wield a whip of pure auric energy. I've never seen such power in my life, not since the elder times. Dr. John Dee glanced at her sharply. You saw the girl, but what of the boy? What was he doing? I did not notice him. Ha, Dee said triumphantly. He turned back to the sword. The Morrigan's cloak rustled warningly. Make this your last question, Doctor. The trio looked up to see the utter blackness was almost upon them. Less than 10 feet ahead of them, the world ended in nothingness. He turned back to the world. Did you awaken the girl? A bubble popped, and the sword ran with the image of Sophie rising off the ground, her aura blazing silver. Yes. And the boy? The sword showed Josh cowering in a corner of darkened chamber. No. The Morgan's claw-like hand gripped Dee's shoulder and jerked him to his feet. He caught his sword and shook the bubbling water droplets into the rapidly encroaching void. The mismatched trio, towering Betsette, Dark Morrigan, and the small human, raced away as the world crumbled into nothingness behind them. The last remnants of their army, the Birdmen and the Cat People, remained, wandering aimlessly. When they saw their leaders fleeing, they turned to follow. Soon every creature was racing to the east, where the last of the Shadow Realm remained. Sinwent limped after Betsette, calling out her name, begging her to stop and help him. Oh. But the world dissolved too quickly. It swallowed birds and cats. It took the ancient trees and the rare orchids, the magical creatures and the mythical monsters. It consumed the last of Hecate's magic. Then the void claimed the sun, and the world went dark and was no more.